So we'll put you kind of more in the center. I don't think you're going to really be looking at the screen. Am I on? Yes, I am. Good. Well, good evening. I'm Gilbert Vicario, Senior Curator at the Des Moines Arts Center and Organizing Curator of Field Road Cloud Art in Africa. I'm thrilled to welcome Nick Cave to the Des Moines Arts Center. Mr. Cave is a contemporary artist that currently lives and works in Chicago. He was born and raised in Fulton, Missouri, by his mother Sharon, along with 7 other children.
Boys.
All boys. Nick attended the Kansas City Art Institute, where he received his BFA in 1982. He did graduate studies at North Texas State University in Denton between 1984 and 1986, and received his MFA from the Cranbrook Academy of Art in 1989. Nick joined the faculty of the Art Institute of Chicago after graduating from Cranbrook, and currently serves as a director of the graduate fashion program at the Art Institute. He is an educator, visual artist, and self-described messenger. He's perhaps best known for his ritualistic costumes called sound suits. These sculpted full-body sound suits are layered and textured in metal, plastic, fabric, hair, and objects designed to rattle and resonate in concert with the movement of the wearer, oftentimes Cave himself. Nick Cave has an extensive exhibition history that goes back at least 20 years. I have a feeling it's more than that. I'm not sure. It includes group exhibitions, solo shows, performances, and this I love, dream projects. One of Cave's well-known projects is Drop, Sound Suits and Degrees of Observation, a performance parade featuring 10 dancers and 60 sound suits. In 2007, he planned an event in Chicago involving 3 dance companies, musicians, and over 120 sculpted suits. This summer, he will have an expansive exhibition in Detroit that will consist predominantly of public performances and events throughout the metropolitan area. The show is called Here, 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 and will be more or less headquartered at the Cranbrook Art Museum in the Detroit suburb of Bloomfield Hills. But I have a feeling it will also be in other parts of the city. I think I read something about
that's where the exhibition will be, but the performance labs will be throughout the metropolitan city. Yeah.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more of that later. For now, I want you to welcome Nick Cave, and his partner Bob Faust is also here. So please give them a warm welcome. For being here, Nick. I guess we can start at the beginning just to kind of get warmed up. I'm very intrigued. Well, you know, one thing that I didn't mention, aside from all of these undergraduate and graduate studies in fine arts, you also found the time to join the Alvin Ailey dance troupe in New York, I believe, or maybe in Kansas City, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was, I really didn't join the troupe, but I studied within the program at the University of Kansas, Kansas City, and then in summer in New York.
Okay.
So really, I was really looking at it as just another sort of medium to sort of implement within my practice.
Okay. And there was also a strong fashion component to your work and to your life.
Really.
And how did that develop?
Well, you know, after grad school, I was offered a job at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago. So that's why I'm in Chicago. But it was a full-time visiting artist position for 5 years. And then after that, they wanted me to stay on part-time, and I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. And then I happened to go to dinner with some friends, and they offered to support me in opening a retail shop. So I had a clothing store for 10 years.
Oh my God, I didn't know that. And was it, you know, it's interesting to me the way these academic institutions work. Were you mostly, though, at that time doing sculpture, or was it more a cross-disciplinary thing at that time?
You know, at that time I was really sort of doing, you know, the work that I was doing in grad school, which was large sort of constructive paintings.
Okay.
It was not until '92 is when the first sort of sound suit appeared.
Right.
In the world.
Well, let's talk about the sound suits, because obviously it's what you're most well known for. But I think a lot of people haven't really understood the impetus for creating these objects, structures, garments, and it's a very interesting story. And obviously, 1992 is specifically is very important to that.
You know, it was. You know, it all came about really from the Rodney King sort of incident, the LA riots. And, you know, I think for me, it's just, we never know what can sort of shift our way of thinking and making. And, you know, for me, it was so profound what I was reading and then looking at myself and thinking that, you know, outside of the privacy of my own sort of home, you know, I could be sort of racially profiled. And so it really I started to think a lot about, really about myself and my identity and how I'm sort of perceived. And again, as I was reading about his sort of character and you know, thinking, what does it feel like to be discarded, viewed less than, dismissed? You know, I happened to be in the park one day and I was sitting on a bench and I looked down on the ground and there was a twig, and for some reason I just started collecting all the twigs. And then I took them home and then I sort of made this sculpture, not knowing that I could wear it until it was completed, and then I put it on and then it made sound, and then I started thinking about the role of protest. In order to be heard, you got to speak louder. So it really started to really expand from that point. And I think from that point till today, I've always been sort of interested in the found sort of object as the sort of instigator in my work, the discarded. Someone's junk is another person's treasure is really sort of what really helps and shapes and forms sort of the beginning of a new idea.
But you've spoken in other interviews about your childhood, and actually this impulse to make things really started very early on.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you're growing up with 7 brothers, you know, I sort of got the hand-me-down. So at that point is when I started to dissect and cut and rebuild a garment. So it really was sort of the beginning of me sort of taking this sort of approach to application and applying and negotiating, you know, what that garment is going to be for me.
Right. Well, in a way, it's almost, you know, you're building a world for yourself, you know, through your imagination. You created, you know, early on, there seems like there was this need to make things with your hands that in some way shielded you from a lot of...
I think that, and I think, you know, again, just sort of being raised with, you know, parents that, you know, really sort of celebrated that and supported that. And yes, you know, I have an older brother who's an artist as well. So I've been surrounded by the sort of the idea of making and building things from nothing, which I think, you know, is interesting. It's not like that you need, you know, when you don't have a lot, you know, how do you sort of still find ways to sort of be creative? And I think that has always, again, been a very sort of critical part in sort of establishing and identifying myself as a visual artist.
Wondered if you could talk a little bit about your studio practice. challenges because now, moving forward 20 years, your production is quite astonishing. It's incredibly complex, and there's this impulse to, there's a drive. There's something that's driving you, which I find so fascinating, and I think everyone finds so fascinating. So I think a lot of people want to kind of had an inside view into what, I don't think your practice is solely studio-based, and we'll talk more about the performative aspects later, but it is fascinating to see what comes out of your head and out of your studio. So I was wondering if you can give us a little,
the studio.
a little bit of the process.
The studio is pretty sort of, the actual studio space is pretty sparse. We work on, I have, my assistants can fluctuate from on regular sort of full-time basis, there's always 8 to 10. But depending on the project, it can change. In April, we have to hire 20 additional assistants for this project that's happening at Mass MoCA in 2016, but it's going to take us a year to make this thing that we need to make. But it's pretty much like a lab. We work on one thing at a time. We create it, we make it. It then goes down to the photo studio, and from there, then it's shipping room, and then we never see it again. So that's really how sort of the operation of how things move through. But in terms of just sort of how things come about, I don't really sketch or draw anything.
Okay.
It's really, again, sort of, it's all based on impulse. It's me sort of, spending time at the flea markets, antique malls. I think what really sort of drives and inspires the work, it's me and Bob flying to, let's say, Washington State, one-way ticket. We rent a cargo van, and then we antique and flea market all the way back. So that's how I sort of resource. So, it's like, it appears when you look at this work that he must be a hoarder, not by any means. It's really that what I need in terms of surplus is really outside of my studio. So that's how I sort of go about sort of finding new inspirations, new ideas. It's really just through some thing that is, it may be so crazy that I couldn't quite fabricate that myself, but it's out there. And that, so it has a pulse to it, and I may buy it, but I may not do anything with it for a while because I'm not sure what I will do with it, but it's that pulse.
So you archive.
Yeah, only to a certain degree. I sort of, stop at a certain point, and then things start to come together.
Have it come there. Well, actually, when you were starting to talk about your studio, it seemed like it really does follow in some way the fashion designer way of working, from what I've understood, in terms of creating a prototype and then, having it produced and fabricated and
yes, sort of.
I don't know. It's
it's not seasonal, that's for sure, in terms of like collections. But I think it's I think I approach clothing the same way. It's I may, when I was doing clothing, I may sort of, there is where I really had to do a little bit. I do more draping.
Okay.
That's the approach that I sort of would take, and then it's not necessary that I will make, let's say, a skirt, and I may find it to not be so interesting, and so I may flip it upside down and say, I like it better this way, so now let's put a waistband on that, and what happens, I'm not committed to anything, but yet I'm committed to the essence of everything. So like, I don't really want to be responsible. Part of me doesn't want to be responsible in the studio, but part of me wants to make sure that it's on point and things are clear.
Yeah.
I mean, the work is clear, but the process of getting there may not, it just comes through just developing and sort of being with it and listening to it as it's sort of appearing in front of me and, accepting, a shift if that occurs in the practice. And yeah, I just want to keep it loose and not overthink it.
But I mean, it definitely, it's funny that so it sounds almost like that you kind of are standing a little bit back from it.
Oh yeah.
But yet it's just, it comes together. There's something that unifies everything.
Well,
Your
I think
aesthetic comes through in your hand. In some way, even though you're not making everything, there's that idea of a hand in the work, both literally and figuratively.
like in my studio, I laid down everything, or I make quite a bit of the work myself, actually.
Okay.
But all decisions I make, I'm interested in just the dynamics and the relationships between A and W. Mm-hmm. Why is there chemistry? Why is there, so where's that harmony? Where's that sort of, proportion of this versus that? And again, it's like a sketch. I'm sketching as I'm developing, as things are coming along. As I take that same approach when I'm doing a video work. It's, I may sort of go into a space. To me, it's like an open canvas. Mm-hmm. I have a very loose idea, but I'm more interested in as we're working and as an idea is being sort of developed, and I'm sort of visually looking at that happening, that I may discover something else that's even more extraordinary. So I don't hold myself accountable for that one way of thinking, as opposed to sort of, how do I remain sort of open to possibility?
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. I think the first time that I saw your work was in the Rubel collection, mm-hmm. maybe mid-2000s at that point. And obviously was very excited about it. There were maybe 3 or 4 pieces at the time. But it wasn't until later that I began to become acquainted with the other component of the work, which is this performative element, this way that you activate these objects, and which you've continued to evolve in really quite an extraordinary way. And I'm wondering, in the beginning, was that always part of the plan, that these things were to be somehow performed or activated? Because I always saw them as these static objects that I wanted to see move, but that didn't.
Yeah, it has always been part of the plan, and for me, I think when I was sort of 18 and went the first time to the Natural Museum mm-hmm. in New York, and I sort of was, looking at these sort of artifacts and these sort of relics and these vestments and, as art objects, but yet, they also served a function within a society. And so I was like, why is this now sort of, taken out of context and then placed in this kind of setting, and I'm forced to sort of look at it in a different way. So I've always been interested in that duality, that, how does does the object sort of hold up as a sculptural object, as a static object? And also I was very interested in, like, what does that do how does the mind sort of get itself in a place of thinking about the possibility of performance and movement? Mm-hmm. But then also I was interested in the performance aspect of it too. But I think for me, it's really sort of, I started doing sound suits in '96, and then literally I just went underground mm-hmm. for about maybe 7 years and started doing more other work because I just wasn't quite ready for what I saw in front of me, like the intensity. What I saw, I knew that I was not in the sort of the frame of mind to be able to handle the intensity of that. So I just sort of put it to the side and started doing other things. But, and then I had to surrender and accept that this was really going to be the path into other sort of possibilities.
I've always liked that. I've heard other artists talk about, making things and then putting them away because they're not ready to reveal them.
Right.
I think it's really fascinating, and I never would have guessed that you had that similar. For example, an artist like Zoe Leonard, who's a photographer, who will take photographs and she won't develop the film for 5 or 10 years, and then when it's ready, it's ready. And I find that really interesting because it really gives the work, this sense of birth in a way, like it's not quite ready until it's ready.
Well, I think the work was ready. I wasn't ready.
You weren't ready.
Right. I just
That's
wasn't.
okay. Yeah.
I just wasn't ready to deal with the sort of responsibility of it. So that's really
What do you mean by that, the responsibility?
just the pressure of like standing behind it and getting behind it and sort of being on board and I could from what I was looking at I knew that I was not in the right place. So
But the performance, because again, I come from such a sort of a conceptual background. Performance means something very different, and I think what's so refreshing, it's more that kind of Eastern European, somebody like whipping themselves, in a corner,
okay.
a la Marina Abramovich or something. You know what I'm saying? It's durational performance. But I mean, yours, one of the things that I love about the work is that it kind of reaches back. It goes further back, it goes beyond modernism and really pulls into something really wonderful, which I think people tend to connect more easily with the work because of that, because it somehow has, it draws from tradition, it draws from things that are in some cases non-Western or just not what you would expect. That's things that aren't really kind of necessarily a linear modernist connection. And I think part of that, I guess, is why Alvin Ailey was probably so important in the sense of dance feeding into your work.
Yeah, I sort of, I'm not really interested in dance as opposed to movement, which is very different, I think. And I sort of, I approach performance as I do my work. To me, it's really about sort of, again, when I walk into a space, it's just purely an open canvas. So it's really about, when you had drive-by here, that was done in a day, but it was sort of done in these sort of segments of just, the thought, these sort of bubbles that I needed to sort of, create and sort of make a reality. And then I think the real sort of building of that piece was, and what I call the choreography of that piece was really in the editing. Wow. That's when I really felt that it was coming together. It was not that it was that I saw this sort of overall sort of performance piece in front of my face. It was really sort of, I'm more interested in the sort of that moment where it peaks. Just that second that it peaks, capturing that and then taking these sort of components and sort of.
Well, so I guess it is more conceptual than I've given you credit for. Okay, thanks for correcting that. I think that's very interesting. Well, the other element or component to I think why people are drawn so much to your work is that it very often, and it seems to be more the case, goes beyond the museum walls. And I would say, I think this idea, I think I mentioned to you, I think you're a household name, for better, for worse, based on the attendance tonight and based on how attracted people are to your work. But I think, you were probably the first visual artist that I ever saw on CNN, which I think is a big deal. And it was when you were when you were working on the Grand Central Station project. And I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about that experience and what it meant to work in such a public space.
We had these sort of, it's interesting when you're working with, not only in that sort of type of public space, but working with everyone that's involved. And, where the limitations are what you can and cannot do. And, we had no sort of rehearsal space there. There was no green room there. We didn't know this until maybe a couple of days prior to the performance.
Oh my God.
So I'm like, no green room, no rehearsal space. Okay, what does this mean? And so I really sort of, but I understand dancers and I understand space. So we were able to rehearse in the Avenali studio one evening for maybe 3 hours. So we had to literally come up with the choreography of that whole piece, which I wasn't concerned about because that's how dancers, we can get it in a matter of a half hour. We know the choreography. And but what I didn't know is that the following morning we would be the first sort of performance at Grand Central Station. So we had to then also we had to think about, what are we going to do? How are we going to sort of approach staging this piece? We were thinking that we had a green room so everything would be stored in there, and it wasn't. So, I'm just sort of thinking out loud and like, okay, what am I going to do? So we just sawhorses came to mind. So we went and got 60 sawhorses, placed them in the station, Vanderbilt Hall, and then literally, basically on each sawhorse was the actual object. And then we decided that the dancers will actually then dress as part of the performance in front of the audience.
Wow.
So that's how that all came together in a matter of minutes. I had to pull it together, but that's fine. I kind of worked that way anyway. And but then flying there, I'm thinking, oh my God, Grand Central Station twice a day. I'm gonna lose it. I'm just used to doing performance once or twice and it's done. But it was like the most amazing experience.
So it was twice a day for how long?
A week.
Oh my God.
It was amazing on multiple levels. Just how it transformed the space, what it did to the people in the space. Again, people coming and going. That was interesting. But by Tuesday, there was an emergency meeting because there was too many people in the space. So, every day it started at 11. By 10, they had to lock the doors to keep the crowd under control. But, there was people that came every day, every single day that I was able to sort of get to know, and just the kids. I mean, it was amazing how the performers became more involved and developed more into character as they understood the audience. And so it was, and the fact that, the audience was flushed out at 11, then at 2 o'clock was a new sort of audience, really was sort of amazing. And so it really made me understand why I do what I do, why I'm here. And it's really that I get the museums, I get the galleries, I know that, but it's really, I'm more interested in how can I use my work as an artist with a civic responsibility. I think that's the most important thing to me.
Okay. So that's in a sense, that's kind of when you worked it out, because you were saying that you didn't quite, was that in a way, did that help, it helped to form or galvanize your practice?
Yeah, that just helped. Again, it helped me, again, it's all about trusting yourself and I think and just sort of thinking about the way, it's interesting how your practice can sort of also move into, let's say, set design, for a better word. I was just in Shreveport, in Louisiana the other day, and I'm doing a performance down there, and I happened to be in this theater, and the tables were turned on their round tables, but they were sort of taking them down, but they were sitting up where the circle was sort of going vertical, and it was amazing. And so I just created a piece on the plane, then I'm gonna use the tables that way in this performance piece. So it's like, again, and then I was thinking about, that's really how I work in the studio. It's still sort of like using what's around us and how can we sort of redetermine.
Yeah. Well, it keeps it fresh. I mean, it sounds like rehearsal is not part of the...
Totally, So, it was amazing, Grand Central Station, but, that's really, at the end of the day, probably the way that I like to work. What fulfills me the most is this sort of outreach work, sort of bringing my work to a community and then hiring the community to build the performance through musicians and dancers.
Yeah, no, it's quite wonderful. Well, I was thinking a lot about the spiritual in art and what you do, but also the civic and political responsibility that comes with that. And I'm not sure if that's something that you probably get asked a lot, and I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more in general terms, how, obviously your early experiences were...
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's always been in my work. I think that, for me, I'm interested in, not being sort of dismissed as an artist or, individuals not sort of giving, the work the time that it needs. So I think a lot about, positioning and what does that mean? How can I sort of create work that, it's seductive and lures one into it, and then once that happens, then you can sort of see what's behind it. But, my work, what drives the work is, I think myself as a Black male in America is really sort of the sort of nemesis behind what really fuels the work is that and yeah.
I mean, there's definitely a discomfort, and I mean, it's despite how beautiful these objects are, there's nothing, there's a substance and there's something that's very powerful behind it, which I think is what makes the work so appealing. And I like to ask artists many times, what is it that keeps you up at night? Because, beauty, it's not just about making something beautiful, but it really comes from this place. It comes from the problem.
It comes from Trayvon Martin. It comes from, St. Louis. It comes from, just what went down in Indiana.
Yeah. No, and it's, it's funny, you talk about Rodney King, and it's like, those, that's, the civil rights movement is not over. by any means. You know,
No.
it continues, and it seems like it's even more problematic
Yeah.
now. You know, it's really kind of messed up.
I mean, I'm just now starting like my TM13 series, which is Trayvon Martin.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm just now getting, when I get back, I'll be building this piece for my show at Cranbrook. So, you know, I have my list of issues that I need to address in my work.
Right.
And it just takes time to sort of work through that and you know, what does that piece look like today versus in 92?
Right.
So,
Yeah. It's very interesting. Well, that takes me, I guess, up to the current body of work that you're doing, or I think it was always there. I think there were always elements there, but for me it was, you know, walking into your gallery in New York last fall and seeing there were probably 20 or 30 pieces in that exhibition.
Right.
3 of which are now here at the Des Moines Arts Center. And there's a wonderful interview that you did with Andrew Bolton, which I really enjoyed reading, which gets to this idea of racist memorabilia. And it does seem to be that it's come to a critical head in your work. And maybe, you know, I guess there are different ways we can approach the idea, the whole process of collecting the pieces. Maybe we should start there. Just
yeah,
talk
I mean,
a
I
little bit
think,
about-
you know, what was interesting, again, we were out on one of our sort of outings and sort of looking for things, and I just happened to run across this object that I found, and it was this sort of container of this sort of black man's head, and it says spittoon, and I just went into a fucking spiral. Because I was like, what? I just was, it literally just like took me by storm, and I just
What state were you in?
I don't, where did we find that, Bob? Where?
Georgia? No. Boston?
Yeah, in Boston.
Okay.
And so then that just sort of made me come from behind the sound suits and just sort of like, okay, I'm just going to put it out there this time. And I was ready to sort of make a shift in my work. You know, I've been thinking about, oh, I've got to move on. And so what you have in the gallery is the beginning of this sort of shift, you know, that, so instead of sort of, you know, covering up really what is important to me in terms of the racial and social sort of issues around the work, I started to then dissect and sort of come to the front of that. And so then I just started looking at collecting sort of, I was very interested in sort of, you know, race as a sort of, as a commodity, race as a consumerism, and sort of looking at racial consumerism and the fact that a race also produced all of these products that can be bought, which was just crazy to me.
You know, and
well,
it's funny because I remember not too long ago I was in Pittsburgh, and we went to a collector who collected this stuff. And it was, you know, mostly little blackface dolls. But, and so not only was there a market for them, there continues to be this kind of collecting.
yeah, there continues to be, you know, this, well, it's out there, so it's available. But I was more interested in the sort of, the more sort of extreme sort of objects, you know, where it was, you know,
The spittoon and
the piece that you have here that I'm holding the head that was from a carnival.
Can you tell
game.
the audience what, because I actually just read something that speculated as to what it could have. I kept telling people that it was a mallet, but in fact it was might have been something.
Yeah, it was from a carnival, and it was a head that bobbed up and down, and it was a cigarette would go in the mouth, and then you would throw rings
Oh my God.
on it. So,
And how do you feel this new work has been received, but from those that
well, I was
comfortable
really,
with the sound suits?
you know, I thought the show was really a heavy show. It was very in your face.
Yeah.
And I love that, you know, Bob, who's has a graphic design firm, also does all of my books and any sort of publication, created that newspaper, the takeaway newspaper.
Oh, he did.
Yeah.
Okay, love it. Yeah.
And because I was very interested in again, how do we sort of, and Bill Gates wrote an amazing essay for the paper. You know, I was interested in, you know, again, how does the exhibition live outside of the gallery? And so that was the way in which we were able to do that. But, you know, what was interesting for me, which was shocking at the same time, is that, you know, anyone that wrote about the work never talked about anything at the end of the day. So I thought, again, here we are even within the arts, that there is not this sort of conversation about race. And so I was a little sort of, I felt sort of, I don't know, I just felt a bit sort of disconnected. That, you know, I needed something to validate that someone got it. But, you know, I got that through a number of people and through Facebook. But in terms of in print,
I think it's going to. Oh, excuse me. I don't want to cover my mic. I think it's going to take time. You know,
well,
we
how
talked
much
a lot about.
time? What time? When?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I mean, what I was gonna say is, you know, for example, in terms of the density, the way you build these objects, it takes a lot of, it takes commitment, and it really challenges a viewer. And I would tell people, you know, you really have to imagine you walked in, you know, you come out from where it's very sunny, and you walk into a room and it's dark. And it takes you a while. You have to stay with it, and you have to let your eyes adjust. And that's what I mean. I'm not saying that, you know, obviously there's a great urgency in what you're trying to say through the work.
well, I don't know if I can agree. I mean, I just think that, you know, I can't agree.
Okay.
I don't even know how to even explain it, because I think that, you know, my mother could have said, you know, it takes time.
Yeah.
As she was growing up, my grandparents can say it takes time. I mean, at some point we have to somehow come together, and, you know, I'm trying to do my part to be proactive and put it out there, and so in response, in particular within the art world, where, you know, we talk about diversity and
Yeah.
or do we? You give me that look like.
No, I mean, no, I mean, it's not a very diverse art world.
Well, no, well, you're right. I mean,
Yeah, no, it's frustrating.
so many.
Oh, yeah. I mean, how much time do we have? We need to talk about that. But I love that there was a quote that kind of appears in a couple of different things, which I really love, where you say, "I'm working toward what I'm leaving behind," which I think there's something so beautiful about that statement. It's so poetic, but so complicated. And I'm hoping that you can maybe offer some further thoughts on that. But I think
it's what we're all doing. You know, why are we here? I mean, so I think it really sort of comes out of that. I don't think it's complicated at all. I think it's really sort of asking yourself, you know, what is purpose? And how do I apply myself to be sort of useful in the world, and what does that mean? And so I'm just doing it, using art as that becomes the vehicle for that for me.
Let's talk a little bit about, I'm actually very excited about the project you're developing in Detroit. And I guess in a way, it's a coming home in some sense, since you're a graduate of Cranbrook. And I mean,
know,
that,
right?
again, sorry?
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. It's a big
Because
deal.
you know why it's a big deal? Because I worked in that museum in grad school.
Oh, really?
I mean, that's like, and I was like always in trouble. Because I always was like not coming to work because I'm working in my studio, or I would leave the job early because I needed to go do my work. But yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and when I was asked to do the project there, I said, I will only do it if I can work in Detroit. Because, you know, for me as a grad student, you know, Detroit saved my life. I mean, I was the only black person there when I was in grad school. And so Detroit was, I'm telling you, was my savior. It like just gave me the balance that I needed while being at Cranbrook. So, you know, I feel that, you know, again, just, you know, what it provided me, I think about, you know, okay, now I can sort of now go back to a city that's sort of in this sort of rebirth and be effective and.
Yeah. I visited Detroit 2 years ago and obviously wanted to see the Diego Rivera murals, but there were brownouts and the Art Institute, the lights went off and we had to leave. So we went to the Motown Museum. I don't know if you've been to Motown. And I have to say that for me, that was when I got it. When you talk about something, creativity, innovation, something that came out of that city, that just humble little house, and really just was an incredible experience to me to go through there and to really connect with the tour guides. And it was like the best tour I've ever taken of a museum. And so I'm excited because I'm hoping that, I know that spirit of Detroit is something that you will be connecting.
Yeah, we're going to be working with a lot of the cultural centers there and a lot of the youth programs there, and really creating these amazing performance labs and bringing this sort of work into communities that are sort of deprived of that. And again, that's what I am here to do, and that's what I need to do, and then that will sort of come together at the end in a larger performance piece that will be at the Masonic Temple there.
What do you know? What date that? Thereabouts.
Oh, it's no.
I'll talk to the curator.
Bob
You don't have to. Oh, what's that?
Bob will know.
Bob will know. Bob will
Yeah,
know.
we're doing. The show opens June 19th.
Okay.
But then we're doing performance from June 19th all the way through October.
October. That's wonderful. And I think you said that there's a Mexican town. There's a neighborhood in Detroit.
Yeah.
See, I didn't. That's interesting.
We're doing a performance lab there as well. We found this amazing sort of amazing theater that's been renovated, where we're going to premiere 6 short films.
Okay.
And then next to the center is a youth center, where we will then host an event and do some performance work there.
Wonderful.
So really, we're really going in and really, invading neighborhoods and sort of, again, trying to sort of rejuvenate, refuel.
Sounds wonderful. Well, I think a lot of the audience are anxious to ask you questions. I think maybe it would be a good time. I think that there are mics that are going to be passed down. So you just raise your hand again and we'll... My father actually lived in Detroit as a sort of kind of shuffled off to some relatives in Detroit. So it's part of like my trying to.
I'm coming down to
Yeah.
the front here. Just
Oh.
1 second. Here I come. The microphones are more for the audience's benefit to hear the question, so please wait till it's passed.
Okay.
First of all, thank you so much for coming out here. It's been a real treat. I am fascinated that your work is kind of twofold. You have a sculptural object, but there's also an activation and a performance and a life to it. I'm wondering if I could get both of your opinions, actually, or thoughts on preservation and how it's displayed, both as a curator and an artist, how you imagine these in 50 years when there's a value to it and production has stopped.
Can I answer that first?
You sure can.
You're not, this is not a very curatorial thing to say, but it's one of the thing about question of preservation drives me crazy. Because, contemporary art is meant to be enjoyed in the here and now. And it's really important, it's really intended for the people who are occupying the same air that the artist is occupying to enjoy it. And I think, when you have to deal with lighting issues, with all of that, and that just absolutely drives me crazy. And I know I shouldn't be saying that. Jeff just walked out.
Jeff, it's okay. I'm not sure if I really think about it much. I do think about it, but, I have to make things out of what they need to be made out of, and hopefully they will be around. But, longer than me, at least.
Thanks.
I think your work is wonderful.
Thank you.
It knocks me out, actually, and I want to see it about 6 feet away. I'm also curious about a mundane matter. Some of those sound suits look like they could weigh 100 pounds or more. And somebody gets in that and has to start dancing?
Well, not all of them are used in performance. And the ones that are, they're sort of, the way in which they're built is very different. The materials are different. They're materials that can handle the stress and things of that sort. And so from a technical perspective, they're built just very different. And, a lot of these you can't physically wear.
Well, what's the
Joe, we've
heaviest?
got one over here too.
Pardon me?
What is the heaviest of all those pieces?
Which is the heaviest?
What is the heaviest of what I physically have been in?
Yeah, there you go.
Because I've been in each and every one. I think probably one of the bird structures. But that was never to be worn in performance. That's early at the beginning. And I just sort of had to put it on to sort of get this one photograph and never again.
Okay.
Hi, Nick. I
Hi.
am your biggest groupie in Des Moines. I saw your exhibit in Denver a year and a half ago, and since then, if anybody comes to my condo, I make them sit down with me and watch YouTube videos of Nick Cave YouTube's little segments. I think part of why I love your work is I love modern contemporary dance, and I've been going to Des Moines has a great dance series. About a year and a half ago, I also had Martha Graham troupe come to Des Moines as part of that series, and they did a piece that was choreographed back in the 50s or 60s with props that were designed by the sculptor Noguchi. And I keep thinking there really ought to be a major contemporary dance group that designs a dance with Nick Cave sound suits. Am I daydreaming, or is there any discussions like that?
We're doing that ourselves, I think. I think, it has been, the proposition has been there, but I'm not quite ready. I'm not done doing what I need to do with performance. Maybe in 10 years.
Hi, Nick.
Hi.
Pleasure to meet you one-on-one, apart from seeing the amazing works. Something which I really missed from the conversation was, I want to know more about sensuality and shape. Something which I missed in this conversation. I want to know more about that.
About sexuality and
Sensuality.
oh, sensuality, same thing. What do you want to know? I think that, I don't know. I think it really I think all of that lies within ideas around adornment and embellishment and, the opulence of all of that. It's really sort of what, I think when I start to think about ways in which how things are built, I'm very interested in the construction of that and, how things look and again, the way in which a surface can sort of, in the studio, we build three-dimensional surfaces. So it's really just really about these levels of application and just really the physical hand being a major part of the development of the work and that being relevant.
We'll go down to the front where Laura is.
Good evening, Mr. Cave. Thanks for being here. Welcome to Des Moines. I have a question about the facelessness in the sound suits. What is it that brought that about? And I guess the second part of the question would be, you made comments as to not being prepared for the next evolution of the work. And it kind of made me think about like a cocoon stage almost, like being inside these suits, kind of wearing the traditions and whatnot and embodying those traditions. Is that kind of, do you see it that way at all? But mostly the facelessness, I'm really interested in that.
No, I don't see it that way, but, the facelessness comes from me sort of, again, it's really sort of taking the sort of political sort of direction, and you're hiding gender, race, class, forcing you to look at the work without judgment. So I think we tend to want to categorize and place things in a way in which we can understand, as opposed to sort of coming to something and being open to something that perhaps is different.
We're going to go up here.
Mine is really not a question. It's a thank you for saying we're out of time. And my comments are really to all the Iowans sitting here in the audience. In Iowa, according to the 2010 census, out of 100,000 white people, 340 are in prison. Out of 100,000 black people, 3,400 people are in prison, which is 1,200 more than the national average. And it is a disgrace, it's a shame to our state, and we need to rise up and take action. And I want to thank you for saying we're out of time, because we are.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I would love to make a statement actually adding to that. I was in Detroit as well 2 years ago, actually for a success story of a community garden. There's a woman who's doing amazing things called Detroit Dirt. It's actually just 2 blocks around from the Mexico area that you'll be going to. And if you can stop, it's called Cadillac Urban Gardens. It's a really amazing thing, and it's great to see someone as successful as yourself to be able to go back there and inspire Detroit, because I think it's been through a lot. It was really amazing to see Detroit firsthand, and after I went there, I really engulfed myself in research for about a month of what it's gone through and where it's going to go, and I think it needs a lot of inspiration, and it's been definitely stated that it's a place to watch for the arts.
Great.
Thank you.
I'm excited to go.
We're going to come up into this row. Then, Laura, will you come up into this row? And there's a gentleman on that end after Jim.
You said beginning in April you're taking on 20 extra assistants for a big
Where
project.
are you?
Is that the Detroit project, or I thought you said for a year? What is the project that requires all the additional assistants?
That's Mass MoCA. That's in October of 2016.
Oh my God.
Which is, the space is about the size of a football stadium.
Yeah.
Me and Bob went there, and the only thing that I did, I just laid down in the middle of the space. And I just said, yeah, I can do it. I think I can do it. No. But it's going to be an amazing project. Mass MoCA, the thing that's interesting is that there, the exhibition's up for an entire year. So that changes how I think about what that will be. But I'll give you a hint of what it will be, the visual sort of idea of what it's going to be. So what I'm doing there is I'm going to create the experience of being in the belly of a sound suit. So that's all I know, but.
So we're in this row down on the other end.
Hi. Could you say something about that troop of large, white, hairy, bunny rabbit-like suits, please?
Yeah, that was part of an exhibition in New York maybe 8 years ago. And, they were created, I had just lost my best friend, and that exhibition was in honor of him. And they were these sort of guardians that sort of welcomed you into that particular show.
I see we have a question in the back on the top, Laura.
Hi. I was just looking at a lot of the crocheting and knitting in your work, and I was curious if you've ever been labeled as a fiber artist.
Yeah, why? Yeah, sure, of course.
Yeah.
But I don't care. I mean,
I'm
that's just another label.
The next show.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been labeled a lot of things. What do you do?
Yeah. I'm just
But
curious.
no, but the thing that's interesting there is that I'm very interested in really, again, sort of holding on to these traditions that are no longer existing and being sort of operated and developed. So, I'm not crocheting those myself. That's me, again, scouting and sort of collecting. And so it's really about the importance of that, functioning as a decorative sort of device in the work, as a medallion in the work. I look at that as I look at me collecting a ceramic bird. I mean, part of this work also comes out of, as a grad student, what was forbidden in art school, and to me, this is at the same time what I grew up around, and my grandmother had these things in her house that were precious, and this was viewed as art, and I'm just sort of like holding on to this, holding on to that, and like bringing it all together, and we can talk about craft, art, design, fashion, performance, dance.
Yeah, I guess I was just kind of curious from a female's perspective, where sometimes we get labeled as fiber artists. And
Work through it.
Yeah.
Work through it.
Hi, I have to say that from the first one of your pieces I ever saw, which actually was only a couple years ago at Crystal Bridges Museum in Arkansas, there's clearly a very magical and transfixing quality to being in the presence of your stuff. And listening to you all speak about the gallery exhibit in New York with the racially charged artifacts, it just makes me crave to see them and to be present with them. Are you going to be touring more of the collection? Are they going to be collected other places? I guess my question is how often are we going to have opportunities to see like Nick Cave collections together, as opposed to, because I'm just sitting here transfixed by this slideshow and I just want to be next to the artifacts.
Well, can I say something?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you were mentioning all of these different craft, performance, fashion, all of that. I think it all boils down to labor. And I think for me, I think that's that's what really overwhelms and impresses me, is the amount of labor that's going into it. And I think that's really, when you start getting beneath the surface of what's happening.
Right.
You know, it's about work. It's about working through things, and it's about, getting to another point. The thing about it taking time, I guess I wasn't really, I wasn't saying that we need more time to understand, but that, the art world is slow in a lot of ways. And it's gonna start seeping into institutions. I know you don't agree.
It's not slow.
I know you don't agree. But I mean, when I was there were only two people. One was the director of the Nelson Atkins. I'm talking more practical, not philosophically. And I know those, two pieces at least are in museum collections. One is here and one is in Kansas City. So, I mean, I don't know. I wish every museum in the country would go there and buy something and put it up, but that's just me. I don't know, how that's gonna.
Well, nothing ever comes back to my studio, so it's in some private collection or in some museum out in the world. It's out there. And then there's a lot of things coming up, so.
Yeah.
I have. Back here. I was just wondering about like a timeline of when you started the dance. You didn't join the troupe, but you were studying with Alvin Ailey. And did you see, was at that time where the sound suits, they weren't happening yet, but did you see dance being a part of your future in art? Or was it just kind of like an itch that needed to be scratched and something you wanted to try at that time in life?
Dance has always been a part of my sort of life and practice. I've always collaborated since I was like 18 years old, was my first sort of parade. So I've always worked with people and created happenings and spectacles. So it's always been part of, a condition that I'm very, very familiar with.
I had a question about the fashion element of your work, and I remember a few years ago there was an amazing article in Harper's Bazaar where your work was juxtaposed against current fashion and fur coats, and your work and your sense of color and scale and design was so spot on against some of the major fashion designers, and I'm wondering if any of them have ever approached you or if you would ever consider going further down that road.
No. Well, yes, some have approached me, but a lot of fashion designers, which is also amazing that they have credited me for inspiring the recent collections. Definitely, I see it all the time, may it be fashion or even design objects. I'm just excited that, it's inspiring and people are can find ways to enter the work and it can inform other ways of working. But, I'm thinking about retail right now, again. I'm not sure what that means.
Just because everybody wants a little piece of something Nick Cave, and that would be
Louis Vuitton.
a way to get to the mass.
No. But you were part of the Dries Van Noten show, weren't you?
Yeah.
In Paris.
Paris.
Yeah. We actually, one of our pieces went to
Oh,
that
okay.
exhibition in Antwerp, a
Yeah.
Cecily Brown painting. So there is definitely, you know,
These crossovers.
there's
that
a
are
definite
happening.
crossover, yeah.
And I want it to be big.
All right, raise your hand again. The last question. Here we go.
The title of the exhibition is Field, Road, Cloud. Could you just react to that idea of photographs from the Rwanda genocide as a black man? How you've already shown us how deeply felt that is. Did that particular idea strike you at all?
Well, I just saw the show today, which it looks amazing. And we were just sort of talking about those photographs earlier today, and the sort of, you know, the photograph is interesting, but what's more interesting is the little sort of mapping of where these incidents sort of transpired. You know, yeah, I mean, I think about it all the time. I mean, it's, you know, I think about killings and you know, just what's going on in the world in terms of again, the political differences and every day. I don't really know what to, we just have to keep, I think, moving forward and trying to make a difference. I need about 10 of me that could be working globally around the world. Yeah.
Nick, thank you so much.
Sure.
It's wonderful.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.